The gavel came down with a sound that shattered Miranda Cross's world into a million irreparable pieces. Not guilty. Every single charge. Dismissed. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. Her lawyer, Bernard Finch, the most expensive defense attorney money could buy, couldn't even look at her. He was already packing his leather briefcase, his shoulders hunched in defeat, a man who had just watched $3 million worth of legal brilliance evaporate into nothing. Miranda's hands gripped the polished oak railing in front of her, her knuckles bone white, her perfectly manicured nails threatening to splinter against the wood. She had spent 15 years building an empire from nothing but a broken laptop and a dream. 15 years of sleepless nights, cutthroat negotiations, and ruthless decisions that had made her one of the most powerful women in the country. And in the span of a single courtroom proceeding, it had all been taken from her. Stripped away like paint from a weathered house, leaving nothing but bare, splintered wood underneath. The courtroom erupted into chaos around her. Reporters scrambled to their feet, their cameras clicking like hungry locusts, capturing every anguished expression that flickered across her face. She had spent years cultivating an image of unshakable strength, of icy composure that made grown men tremble. The media had called her the Iron Lady of Viridian Tech, a woman who could stare down a boardroom full of hostile investors and make them beg for mercy. But in that moment, she felt like a small child again, abandoned and alone, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart full of shattered dreams. She forced herself to stand, to straighten her spine, to lift her chin with the dignity that had always been her armor. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She would not let them see her cry. She walked out of the courtroom with measured, deliberate steps, her 4-inch heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to her own funeral. Behind her, she could hear the whispers, the murmured speculation, the barely concealed glee of people who had been waiting years to see her fall. The media swarmed her the moment she stepped outside. The courthouse steps had become a circus, a feeding frenzy of flashing cameras and thrust microphones. They had already written their headlines. Cross collapses. The Ice Queen melts. Fraud, embezzlement, and the fall of an empire. They didn't care about the truth. They never had. They only cared about the story, the scandal, the salacious details that would sell papers and drive clicks. Miranda. How does it feel to lose everything? Did you really embezzle the funds? Is it true Julian and Sloane have been together for years? She pushed through the crowd without answering, her face a mask of cold indifference. But inside, her heart was a war zone. Every question was a bullet. Every flash of a camera was a knife. She had trusted Julian Sterling with her life, with her company, with her heart. She had loved him with a fierce, consuming passion that had blinded her to his true nature. And he had repaid that love by systematically destroying her. She finally managed to hail a cab, giving the driver an address she hadn't visited in years. It was the address of a dive bar on the wrong side of town, a place she had sworn she would never return to. But she had nowhere else to go. Her penthouse had been seized by the court along with everything else. Her bank accounts were frozen. Her credit cards had been cancelled. She was, for the first time in her adult life, completely and utterly destitute. The woman who had once been on the cover of Forbes, who had dined with presidents and CEOs, was about to walk into a bar that smelled like stale beer and desperation. The cab dropped her off in front of a building with a flickering neon sign that buzzed with a sound that matched the static in her head. She hesitated for a moment, her hand on the rusted door handle, wondering if this was really where she had ended up. A wave of nausea washed over her as she thought about how far she had fallen. But she pushed the door open anyway. What did she have to lose? The bar was dimly lit, filled with the kind of people who had given up on their dreams long ago. A few heads turned when she walked in, recognizing her from the news, but no one said anything. They just watched her with a mixture of pity and curiosity, as if she were a wounded animal that had wandered into their territory. She ignored them and made her way to the counter, ordering a glass of whiskey she didn't want. She wasn't a drinker, not really. She had always prided herself on her control, her ability to stay sharp and focused even in the most stressful situations. But tonight, she wanted to feel numb. She wanted to forget. She wanted to disappear. She nursed her drink for over an hour, staring at the amber liquid as if it held the answers to all her problems. It didn't, of course. Nothing did. She thought about Julian, about the way he had looked at her on their wedding day, his eyes filled with what she had believed was genuine love. She thought about Sloane, the woman she had known since college, the woman she had cried with over failed relationships and celebrated with over promotions. Sloane had been maid of honor at her wedding. Sloane had held her hand when her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Sloane had promised to always be there for her. And then Sloane had taken everything from her. Her husband. Her company. Her reputation. Her future. The worst part was the humiliation. Everyone in her social circle knew. Everyone had seen the headlines, heard the rumors, witnessed her public downfall. The same people who had once scrambled to get invitations to her parties, who had fawned over her at charity galas, were now whispering behind their hands, laughing at her misfortune. She had been the queen of Viridian society, and now she was the court jester. She thought about her mother, the woman who had worked 3 jobs to put food on the table, who had sacrificed everything to give Miranda a chance at a better life. Her mother had died 5 years ago, just as Cross Industries was reaching its peak. She had never gotten to see her daughter's triumph. And now, Miranda thought bitterly, she would never have to see her fall. That was the only mercy in this entire catastrophe. And then, he walked in. The door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air and the distant sound of traffic. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a tired but kind face. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and there was a 5 o'clock shadow on his jaw that made him look like he had been working too hard and sleeping too little. He was wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans, clothes that had clearly seen better days, and he carried himself with the weary confidence of a man who had seen his share of hard times. His eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on her, they lingered for just a moment longer than they should have. He walked over to the counter and sat down on the stool next to her, ordering a beer with a voice that was warm and surprisingly gentle. "You look like you've had a rough day," he said, not looking at her, his eyes fixed on the bartender as he poured his drink. Miranda laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that seemed to echo in the quiet space. "You could say that. Mind if I join you?" he asked, finally turning to look at her. "I'm not looking for anything. Just company. I've been having a rough day myself." She shrugged, too exhausted to care. "Suit yourself." They sat in silence for a while, sipping their drinks, the noise of the bar fading into the background. The jukebox was playing an old country song, something about heartbreak and loss, and Miranda found herself humming along despite herself. It was a strange comfort, being in a place where no one expected anything from her. She was just another sad face in a sea of sad faces, another broken soul trying to drown her sorrows in cheap liquor. Finally, he spoke again. "Name's Griffin," he said, extending his hand. "Griffin Hale." She took it, her grip weak and listless. "Miranda." "Miranda Cross?" he asked, his eyebrows shooting up. "The Miranda Cross?" She winced, pulling her hand back. "That's me. Though I'm not sure I'm much of anything anymore." He studied her for a moment, his eyes filled with a surprising amount of compassion. "I saw the news," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. That was brutal. What they did to you." "Who?" she asked, her voice sharp with bitterness. "Julian? Sloane? The media? The board? Take your pick. They all had a hand in it. He nodded slowly, swirling his beer. I know what it's like to have everything taken from you. To have someone you trusted betray you in the worst possible way. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. There was a deep sadness in his eyes, a pain that mirrored her own. He wasn't just saying empty words to be polite. He genuinely understood what she was going through. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, in the way his hands gripped his glass a little too tightly. She could see it in the shadows under his eyes, the lines of worry etched into his forehead. This was a man who had been through his own version of hell. What happened to you? She asked, her voice softer now. He was silent for a moment, and she could see him wrestling with whether to tell her. The jukebox switched to a slower song, something about longing and lost love, and the bartender busied himself with wiping down the counter, giving them a small measure of privacy. Finally, Griffin spoke. My wife, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She was my whole world. We met in college. She was an art history major, and I was studying criminal justice. We were complete opposites, but something just clicked. She was creative and spontaneous, and I was logical and methodical. We balanced each other out. We got married a year after graduation, and a few years later, we had a daughter. A beautiful little girl named Darcy. She was 4 years old, with these big brown eyes and a laugh that could light up a room. She loved butterflies. She used to chase them around the backyard, screaming with joy every time she caught one. She was everything to me. My whole universe. Miranda felt a lump form in her throat. She could see the pain in his eyes, the way his voice cracked when he mentioned his daughter's name. What happened? She asked, dreading the answer. One day, my wife decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore, Griffin continued, his voice hollow. She didn't want to be a wife. She wanted to be free. She said she felt trapped, suffocated by the responsibilities of family life. She wanted to travel, to explore, to live without the weight of a child holding her back. So she took Darcy and she disappeared. Just vanished. I came home from work one day, and they were gone. No note, no explanation, nothing. I haven't seen my daughter in 3 years. I've spent every penny I have trying to find her, but her mother is a master at hiding. She covered her tracks so well that even the private investigators I hired couldn't find them. That's horrible, Miranda whispered. I'm so sorry, Griffin. He shrugged, a gesture that was meant to seem casual but was clearly anything but. It is what it is. I've learned to live with it. But I know what it's like to be betrayed by the person you love most in the world. And I know what it's like to want revenge. To want to make them pay for what they did. She nodded, her eyes burning with unshed tears. I want to destroy them, she whispered. Julian, Sloane, everyone who helped them. I want to take everything from them, the way they took everything from me. He turned to look at her, his eyes burning with intensity. Then let's do it together. She blinked, confused. What? I have resources, he said. I may not have money, not the kind you're used to, but I have skills. I was a private investigator before all of this happened. I know how to find people, how to dig up dirt, how to make the powerful fall. And you have knowledge. You know the business world inside and out. You know Julian's weaknesses, his secrets, his fears. Together, we can take him down. We can take them both down. Miranda stared at him, her heart pounding. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Because I know what it's like to be alone. To have no one in your corner. And because I see something in you, Miranda. I see a fighter. I see someone who refuses to give up, no matter how hard life hits her. I see myself. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, and this time, she didn't try to blink them away. They spilled over, trailing down her cheeks in hot, silent streams. She hadn't cried since the day she found out about Julian and Sloane. She had been too angry, too determined to hold herself together. But now, sitting in this dingy bar with a stranger who understood her pain, she let herself break. She let herself feel everything she had been holding back for months. The betrayal. The loss. The overwhelming, crushing loneliness. "I don't have anything to offer you," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm broke. I'm a pariah. I have nothing." "You have your story," he said. "You have your pain. And you have your fire. That's enough. That's more than enough." And so, the unlikely alliance was formed. Two broken people, united by their shared pain and their burning desire for justice. Griffin paid for her drink and escorted her out of the bar, leading her to a beat-up truck that had seen better days. It was a rusty old Ford with a cracked windshield and a bumper held on by duct tape, but it was the most beautiful vehicle Miranda had ever seen. It represented something she had lost long ago. Hope. He drove her to his apartment, a small, cluttered space on the second floor of a rundown building. The walls were covered in photographs and documents, maps and notes, all related to his search for Darcy. It was messy and chaotic, but it felt more like a home than her sterile penthouse ever had. There were photographs of Darcy on every surface, a little girl with a gap-toothed smile and butterfly hair clips. There were stacks of files on the floor, notes scrawled in Griffin's handwriting, maps with red circles marking places he had searched. "I know it's not much," Griffin said, looking around apologetically. "But it's home. For now, anyway." "It's perfect," Miranda said, and she meant it. They spent the next few weeks huddled in his apartment, planning their revenge. He had files, photographs, and documents that he had gathered over the years, evidence of Julian's various indiscretions, his shady business dealings, his connections to organized crime. He had been investigating Julian for years, ever since Julian had represented a rival client in a case that had ruined one of Griffin's old friends. "I've been waiting for the right moment to strike," Griffin admitted, spreading his files across the cluttered table. "But I never had the right partner. I never had someone with your insider knowledge." Miranda studied the documents, her mind racing. She knew Julian better than anyone. She knew his vices, his insecurities, his secret bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. She knew about the offshore shell companies he used to launder money, the bribes he had paid to government officials, the affairs he had conducted with multiple women, all while playing the devoted husband to her. She had been blind, willfully blind, because she had loved him. But now, the scales had fallen from her eyes, and she saw him for what he truly was. A monster. A manipulator. A thief. A man who had used her love and trust as stepping stones to his own ambition. "Here," she said, pointing to a document. "This shell company. I remember Julian mentioning it once, years ago. He said it was for tax purposes, but I always suspected he was using it for something else. If we can trace the money, we can prove that he's been embezzling from the company, not me." Griffin smiled, a slow, predatory smile that made her heart skip a beat. "That's brilliant. I knew you were the right partner." Over the next few months, they worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle of Julian's crimes. They worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and a shared determination to see justice done. As they worked, they grew closer, sharing their fears, their hopes, their dreams. Griffin told her about Darcy, about the little girl's love of butterflies and her habit of singing at the top of her lungs in the car. He showed her photographs, videos, little snippets of a life that had been stolen from him. Miranda told him about her childhood, growing up in a trailer park with a single mother who worked 3 jobs to put food on the table. She told him about the moment she knew she was destined for greatness, when she had built her first computer from spare parts and sold it to a neighbor for $50. "You're remarkable," Griffin said one night, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You built an empire from nothing. You should be proud of yourself, Miranda. The fact that you're still standing after everything that's happened is a testament to your strength. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. Thank you, she said softly. But I couldn't have done any of this without you. You saved me, Griffin. You gave me a reason to keep fighting. He reached across the table and took her hand. We saved each other, he said. That's what partners do. The night before they were set to expose Julian, Miranda couldn't sleep. She paced the floor of Griffin's apartment, her mind racing with fear and anticipation. What if they failed? What if Julian found out and destroyed them before they could act? What if she lost everything all over again? She had already lost so much. She didn't think she could survive another blow. Griffin found her in the kitchen, staring out the window at the city lights. The apartment was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren. You should be resting, he said gently. Tomorrow is a big day. I can't sleep, she admitted. I'm too nervous. What if something goes wrong? He walked over to her and placed his hands on her shoulders. Nothing is going to go wrong, he said firmly. We've done everything right. We have the evidence. We have the witnesses. Julian is going down, Miranda. I promise you. She turned to face him, her eyes glistening with tears. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared of what happens after. What if I can't build my life back? What if I'm just broken forever? He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. You're not broken, he said, his voice fierce. You are the strongest person I have ever met. And I will be here, every step of the way, to help you rebuild. I promise. And then, before she could stop herself, she kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, a question rather than a statement. Her lips brushed against his, hesitant and unsure, afraid of being rejected. But when he responded, pulling her closer and deepening the kiss, she felt something inside her heal. It wasn't a cure, not by a long shot, but it was a start. A promise of something more. A future that wasn't defined by her past. The next morning, they executed their plan. Miranda walked into the boardroom of Cross Industries, flanked by Griffin and a team of reporters she had secretly invited. Julian and Sloane were sitting at the head of the table, looking smug and self-satisfied. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Julian was dressed in an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, his smile confident and predatory. Sloane was draped over him like a trophy, her designer dress clinging to her curves, her eyes filled with the arrogance of someone who thought she had won. Miranda, Julian said, his voice dripping with false concern. What are you doing here? You're not welcome here anymore. Oh, I'm not, she said, her voice icy cold. That's interesting, because I still own the controlling shares of this company, Julian. I may have been voted out, but I'm still the majority shareholder. And I'm here to exercise my rights. Julian's face went pale. You can't do that. You have no standing. You're a convicted criminal. Actually, I'm not, she said, pulling out a file. The charges against me were dismissed, remember? And I have evidence that proves you orchestrated the entire thing. Evidence of embezzlement, money laundering, bribery, and conspiracy to defraud. Evidence that will put you in prison for the rest of your life. She slid the file across the table, and Julian's face went through a series of emotions. Shock, disbelief, and finally, naked fear. Sloane looked like she was about to be sick. The reporters behind her began snapping photos, their cameras capturing every moment of Julian's downfall. The board members were in an uproar, demanding answers, demanding explanations. This is forged, Julian stammered. You can't prove any of this. Oh, I can, Miranda said, smiling for the first time in months. I've got witnesses, financial records, and even a few recordings of your conversations with your co-conspirators. You're finished, Julian. You're both finished. Julian and Sloane tried to flee, but security was waiting at the door, ready to escort them out. As they were led away, Julian turned to look at Miranda, his eyes filled with hatred. This isn't over, he snarled. I'll destroy you. I swear it. No, Miranda said, her voice calm and steady. You won't. Because you have no power anymore. You have nothing. And that's exactly what you deserve. The aftermath was chaotic. Julian and Sloane were arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Their trial was a media sensation, and this time, the headlines were very different. The fall of Julian Sterling. Sloane Whitmore, the best friend who betrayed. Cross rises from the ashes. The public, fickle as always, had turned on them. They were vilified in the press, their reputations destroyed beyond repair. Miranda was reinstated as CEO of Cross Industries, and she wasted no time in rebuilding her company. She fired the board members who had conspired with Julian, and she hired a new team of loyal, talented individuals who shared her vision. She also made a decision that would change her life forever. She sold the company to a large conglomerate, using the profits to start a foundation dedicated to helping women who had been victims of betrayal and abuse. Money isn't everything, she told Griffin one night, as they sat on the balcony of his apartment, watching the stars. I used to think it was. I used to think that if I had enough money, enough power, enough respect, I would be happy. But I was wrong. The only thing that matters is the people you love and the difference you make in the world. He reached over and took her hand. You've made a difference, Miranda. You've made a huge difference. And not just because of the foundation. Because of who you are. You're a survivor. You're a fighter. And you're the most incredible woman I've ever met. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace she had never experienced before. I love you, she whispered. I know it's crazy. I know we haven't known each other that long. But I love you, Griffin. You saved me. He kissed the top of her head. I love you too, he said. And you didn't need saving. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you already are. A year later, they were married in a small, intimate ceremony on a beach in Hawaii. It was nothing like the lavish, expensive wedding she had once imagined for herself. It was simple, beautiful, and filled with the people who mattered most. Griffin's friends from his PI days, her new team from the foundation, and the children they had helped through their programs. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the sound of the waves provided a gentle soundtrack to the proceedings. But the most beautiful part of the day came when Griffin walked down the aisle, holding the hand of a small, dark-haired little girl. Darcy. He had finally found her, with Miranda's help. Using the resources of her foundation, they had tracked down his ex-wife and had fought a long, bitter custody battle. But in the end, they had won. Darcy was home. She was 6 years old now, with her father's warm eyes and her mother's delicate features. She was shy at first, uncertain of the woman who was about to become her new mother, but Miranda had been patient. She had spent months earning Darcy's trust, reading her bedtime stories, teaching her how to bake cookies, taking her to the park to chase butterflies. "Mommy," Darcy said, tugging on Miranda's dress. "Are you really going to be my mommy now?" Miranda knelt down, tears streaming down her face, and took the little girl's hands in hers. "Yes, sweetheart," she said. "I am. And I promise you, I will never, ever leave you. You are my daughter now, and I love you more than anything in this world." Darcy threw her arms around Miranda's neck, hugging her tight. "I love you too, Mommy," she whispered. Griffin watched them, his eyes shining with tears. He walked over and wrapped his arms around both of them, holding them close. "This is everything I ever wanted," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A family. A home. Love. You've given me all of it, Miranda. I don't know how I got so lucky." Miranda looked up at him, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "We got lucky together," she said. "And we're never letting go." 5 years later, Miranda Crosshale sat in her office at the foundation, reviewing the annual report. The foundation had grown exponentially, helping thousands of women across the country reclaim their lives. They offered legal aid, counseling, job training, and housing assistance. They had branches in 10 major cities, and they were expanding every year. She was proud of what she had built, but she was prouder of the family she had created. Griffin was now a private investigator for the foundation, helping women find justice and closure. Darcy was a vibrant, confident 11-year-old, who had inherited her mother's fierce intelligence and her father's kind heart. She was already talking about becoming a lawyer, about fighting for justice just like her parents. They had also added to their family a son, Benjamin, who was now 4 years old, and a daughter, Rose, who had just turned 2. Their home was chaotic, loud, and filled with more love than Miranda had ever thought possible. The walls were covered in children's artwork, the floors were littered with toys, and the kitchen always smelled like something was burning. It was messy and imperfect, and it was everything she had ever wanted. She looked at the framed family portrait on her desk, the 6 of them smiling at the camera, and she felt a surge of gratitude. Julian and Sloane were both in prison, serving lengthy sentences for their crimes. She had heard through the grapevine that Julian was miserable, that he had lost everything and was now just another inmate in a federal prison. Sloane had tried to make a deal with the prosecutors, to turn on Julian in exchange for a lighter sentence, but it hadn't worked. They were both paying for their crimes, and Miranda felt no pity for them. Her mother, who had always been distant and critical, had finally come around. She had watched Miranda's rise from the ashes, had seen the foundation grow and flourish, and she had admitted that she was proud of the woman her daughter had become. It had taken years to heal that relationship, but Miranda was grateful for the reconciliation. And Griffin's ex-wife, the woman who had taken Darcy away, was finally out of their lives for good. She had signed over her parental rights, and she had disappeared to parts unknown. Miranda hoped she had found whatever peace she was looking for, but she didn't dwell on it. Miranda's phone buzzed. A text from Griffin. "Darcy just got her report card. Straight A's. She's already planning her career as a forensic scientist. I think she's going to follow in my footsteps. You ready to head home? The kids are driving me crazy. Ben wants you to read him his favorite bedtime story, and Rose has been asking for you all day." She smiled, her heart swelling with love. "On my way," she typed back. "Tell them Mama's coming." She put on her coat and headed out the door, her heels clicking a confident rhythm on the marble floor. She was no longer the woman who had been destroyed by betrayal. She was Miranda Crosshale, wife, mother, and a champion for women everywhere. She had taken everything that Julian and Sloane had stolen from her and turned it into something beautiful. She had found her revenge, but more importantly, she had found her peace. She walked out into the sunshine, the warm breeze caressing her face, and she felt a sense of joy that had been absent for so long. She was home. She was loved. She was whole. And she was never, ever looking back. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and Miranda knew that this was exactly where she was meant to be. She was Miranda Crosshale, and she was finally, completely, undeniably free.